Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Friday everybody. According to Chinese state media and soon after international media, a few hours ago, General Secretary Xi Jinping sent a message to US President Joe Biden wishing him a speedy recovery from COVID-19. A goodwill gesture in anticipation of a phone call to soon be organized between the two heads of state. We will cover the call once it happens. Okay, let's begin with developments regarding the outbreaks, lockdowns and restrictions in China. The largest outbreak in the mainland currently is in the western province of Gansu, in the provincial capital Lanzhou and a few surrounding urban centers. The province has reported more than 1,400 local cases since July the 8th. Lanzhou, home to over 4 million people, put all of its resident communities under lockdown last week and closed all entertainment venues and other crowded places. The lockdown was scheduled to be lifted this week on Wednesday, but residents living in 95 areas designated as high risk are still required to maintain the lockdown. While these restrictions are going to be painful for many households and businesses in the region, Gansu is not a particularly important logistics hub or economic engine for the national economy, so these disruptions will be modest at the national level and largely localized. Shanghai, on the other hand, is critical to the national economy, and the situation there remains up in the air. This week, the financial hub put 8,000 hospital beds in reserve just in case of another major outbreak. On Wednesday, the city's health authorities also announced that mandatory weekly COVID tests from Shanghai residents will be extended until the end of August at the earliest. We remember that in some cities, like the nearby home of Alibaba, Hangzhou, residents must undergo testing every 48 to 72 hours. In the capital, Beijing, despite only a small handful of cases in recent weeks, this week the city restricted activities of hotels, such as meetings, conferences, training sessions, and even weddings. The southern megacity of Shenzhen, population 18 million, reported 22 new locally transmitted cases for Wednesday, a modest but notable jump in new daily cases for local authorities. The city's party chief expressed in a special conference yesterday, quote, "We must mobilize all resources and adopt all measures to quickly eliminate the risk of a community spread in key areas, resolutely cut transmission chains and contain the outbreak as quickly as possible." End quote. So we should expect a series of restrictions coming into place in the following days. An increasingly useful proxy for measuring the disruptive effects of national lockdowns and restrictions on economic activity is the Road Freight Volume Index, as it reflects both consumption and logistics to some extent. According to data from an industry data provider called G7, in the week of July 11th, China's Road Freight Volume Index fell 18.3% year-on-year, the third consecutive week of decline. Week on week, the index was down a more modest 1.3%. Now, for this first part on the lockdown situation, let's end with some good news. The weeks-long citywide lockdown of the Macau Special Administrative Region will be loosening starting this weekend, with most non-essential industries, companies and venues being allowed to begin reopening from tomorrow. Hey guys, if you're getting some value from the video, don't forget to hit the like button. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, it's just me making these videos every day. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is the best way to help me keep this channel primarily subscriber supported. Thank you so much everybody, as always, for the ongoing support. When we first discussed the breaking news from Monday of US lawmaker Nancy Pelosi leading a delegation to Taiwan next month, we examined some of the PRC reactions, including threats in the state-run Global Times that the People's Liberation Army Air Force should impose a no-fly zone, thus implying that Pelosi's plane could be shot down, a clear act of war. I observed at the time that such a move from the PRC side seems very unlikely. Well, it turns out the US military may disagree. According to multiple US media outlets with sources in the White House, Biden administration officials are indeed concerned that China could seek to declare a no-fly zone over Taiwan ahead of the Pelosi visit, greatly raising tensions and even risking a standoff. Pelosi's plane would be a US military aircraft. Indeed, back when Pelosi had originally planned on an April visit, but subsequently had to cancel, or as we can see here, postpone the visit due to COVID, there had been unconfirmed rumors of PRC warnings to US government officials that her plane would not be permitted to land. But like I said, these were just rumors. Things like analysts or ex-officials saying that PLA representatives had emailed them to express their, quote, personal views, end quote, that a no-fly zone could be imposed. We also remember yesterday that Biden told reporters that the Pentagon had expressed that a Pelosi trip to Taiwan would not be a good idea, indicating at the very least official US military concern. As a quick side note, while we're discussing Taiwan and the US, this week during the annual Aspen Security Forum in Colorado, the US Commerce Secretary via video conference from Washington warned that the United States cannot keep relying on Taiwan for semiconductors and needs to pass legislation to support the domestic production of high-end computer chips, saying to the audience, quote, "This is a Sputnik moment for America. Our dependence on Taiwan for chips is untenable and unsafe." End quote. The Commerce Secretary also discussed the CHIPS Act, which would pump $50 billion into trying to increase American-made semiconductor manufacturing. Now, coming back to the Taiwan trip, most analysts expect the PRC to react forcefully to a Pelosi trip to Taiwan, but still, the idea of shooting down a plane of US lawmakers still seems highly unlikely. Beijing understands that such a move would mean kinetic conflict with the United States. Now, let's end this part with the most recent statement from the People's Republic of China Foreign Ministry. Quote, "Should the US side insist on making the visit, China will act strongly to resolutely respond to it and take countermeasures. That is a promise." End quote. Okay, and let's end with the housing crisis. All this week we have been unpacking the mortgage boycott situation in the country, as well as other signs that the housing crisis is bleeding into the real economy, raising fears of a full-blown financial crisis if mismanaged. The mortgage boycotts have grown to more than 300 properties across more than 90 cities, and there is still much more room for the situation to get worse. According to Capital Economics, construction has been halted on around 13 million apartments during the past 12 months alone. Regulators understand just how bad this could get and are now all over this mess with a lot of short-term relief. Efforts to deal with some longer-term systemic issues like moral hazard, as we will see, may well be undermined, however, with some of these regulatory moves. During a special briefing in Beijing yesterday, Thursday, the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission vowed to work with the central bank, the housing ministry, as well as local governments to, quote, "ensure developers complete construction for pre-sold homes," end quote, including ensuring, quote, "stable and orderly property financing," end quote. This statement is consistent with a similar promise made in an urgently convened meeting last weekend when the banking regulator urged banks to increase lending to developers so that they could complete unfinished apartments. It's no secret what these regulators are concerned about. Quote, "Regulators are seeking to diffuse a growing consumer boycott of mortgage payments that risk spreading the real estate crisis to the banking system. The protests have exacerbated the country's real estate woes and threaten to derail efforts to revive the market amid an economic slowdown." End quote. During the same news conference, the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission spokesperson expressed that China's small and medium-sized lenders disposed of just shy of 600 billion RMB, approximately $87 billion of bad loans in the first 6 months of this year, an increase of approximately 120 billion RMB year on year. As of the end of Q2, overall outstanding non-performing loans in commercial banking was just shy of 3 trillion RMB, an increase of over 100 billion yuan or RMB since the beginning of this year. Meanwhile, according to figures compiled by data provider Wind, WIND, more than half of listed property developers in China, 42 of the 77 builders, with published earnings estimates, expect to have made a loss this year. Some forecasting losses in excess of 1 billion RMB, approximately $150 million each. Only 12 expect to make any profit this year. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.